Hi, and welcome to the Bruce Channel. I'm Bruce, and wow, lots of things to talk about as we combine the end of last year and the beginning of this one. But I think we have to start, as we did last week, with the weather. Last week talked about that unseasonably warm weather in the east, and although there were some tornado deaths, I didn't foresee what was coming. I didn't comprehend just how devastating and how the weather would continue to devolve. After last week's reporting deadline, there were again tornadoes, this time in Texas. They've been keeping records since I think it's 1875, and for the first time ever, more tornado deaths in December alone than the rest of the year combined. And, while those tornadoes were in Texas, further west, still in Texas, there were cars buried under snowdrifts as much as 10 feet high. Then the storm continued to move. Lots and lots and lots and lots of rain. So, 1993, summertime, the Mississippi River flooded as it never had before. But that was from weeks and weeks of almost unending rain. This weather system has now caused the Mississippi to surpass those flood stages. Then it went to the northeast, and now colder weather did get in, so it made for snow and even worse, ice storms. But the tornadoes and the flooding and the snow and the ice and even my blooming irises and now dandelions really are just the tip of this story. This didn't get much play. So this storm, it goes out over the northeast and heads over the Atlantic toward Europe. It's still spinning, and it's a big storm. And then it reaches the warmer water of the Gulf Stream. Now, you may recall, if you look at a low pressure system from space, it appears to spin, I guess that would be this way, counterclockwise. All right, so it's heading east toward Europe. Meanwhile, over Russia, there's a very strong high pressure system. And these two combine like this. They head toward each other, and they make an incredible pressure differential. The barometric pressures are as low as some of the strongest hurricanes ever. Huge winds barreling up and hitting Iceland. Oh, and you probably know this, but Iceland is a nice place to live. There's plenty of green. And Greenland is not a nice place to live. It's mostly ice. Pranksters in geography, I guess. They were doing the naming. Anyway, these two systems combined over the Gulf Stream, warm water, and it set up an express lane. It shot warm air northward, way northward, all the way north. So far north there's nowhere to go but south. And that only happens one place, the North Pole. So remember, we just had winter solstice, right? It's still dark 24/7 at the North Pole. The normal high for this time, 15 to 20 degrees below zero Fahrenheit, of course. Okay? Normal high. But this tropical express, they're still getting data, but it looks like on Wednesday, the North Pole was warmer than western Texas, above freezing, like 40 degrees. All right, so a couple of weeks ago, we were weirded out when it got to be 70 degrees here. That was a record. We got to 72, and it was a record, but for the equivalent, what happened at the pole, on that day when 72 was a record, we would have had to have been like 102. And that is unprecedented, and it's rather scary. When Senator Bernie Sanders called climate change the biggest threat to our national security, I think he was right. And that's not to diminish any of the other threats that are also very real. There's ISIS, there's bombs on airlines, there's GMO food, pesticides causing cancers, the disturbance of bees, that will further lead to less to eat. But ultimately, if the climate does change beyond a certain point, we will be hit with more and more frequent and stronger hurricanes. And repairing that stuff is going to cost a lot of money. But in this country, we're affluent. Imagine more people in the world, but less available land if the seas rise, and less potable water. Greater, longer-lasting droughts and unprecedented flooding, similar to what came to Columbia, South Carolina last year. That never happened before like that. Biblical, once in 1,000 years. So, droughts ruin crops, but so do floods. So more people, less land, less food, I'm speaking globally, but we're seeing refugees from Syria. Why? Because there's fighting and there's nowhere to live. So they leave. And people threatened with no way to live will flee. And then they will fight to live. Okay, I told you last week that on Christmas Eve day we had thunderstorms, and as I predicted, no snow came 7 days later. Instead, 6 days later, thunderstorms again. So I wondered, does that reset the 7-day counter? I'd also mentioned last week that the warm weather was hurting cold weather clothing sales, and a viewer sent me this 60% off flannel lined jeans. I gotta get out more. I never even knew flannel lined jeans existed. Okay, so Christmas, New Year's, yeah. Last week, I noted that self-professed Christian Donald Trump couldn't even take off Christmas from his insulting tweets, but the other candidates, both parties, did ease off for several days. Didn't the warring armies from our own Civil War and the World Wars, didn't they observe truces? Not the Donald. More on him in a bit. Oh, should be noted, maybe it's sad, but former New York Governor George Pataki did end his campaign this week. He really never registered with the voters. And that's a shame because he was one of the more reasoned voices on any of the debate stages, either party. He should have had a go in 2008 maybe, or 2012. Of course, the Republican in 2008 was doomed. Didn't matter whom the candidate was going to be. Doomed. Too many years in an unnecessary war in Iraq. A war for which we're still paying the consequences. And of course, the meltdown that became known as the Great Recession. But I remember, mid-90s maybe, there was a single magazine article, and it wrote of both Governor Pataki and George W. Bush as two new GOP guys to watch out for. I will forever remain convinced we would have been better off with almost anyone but W, but one of the good choices, I think, would have been Governor Pataki. Too bad he passed on 2012, but then maybe he was looking forward to a clean break if Obama won. But who knew that by 2016 the GOP would devolve into a pit of snarling vipers? All right, now not a snarling viper, certainly, but the inner circle of Dr. Ben Carson may have been snarling at each other. Two of his top advisors resigned, saying they would like him, they would vote for him, but they can't work like this. Apparently, Dr. Carson's business partner, very close personal friend, is Armstrong Williams, and apparently the paid political operatives who know how the game works, apparently they felt that Mr. Williams held too much influence over the good doctor. Well, anyway, I found something new, and it made me say, wow, it is even worse than I thought, and I acknowledge that even before the first debate, I didn't think highly of Carly Fiorina. But that's because, as a former techie, as a former IT guy, I've been aware of what she'd done while at Hewlett Packard. I've routinely read the trade papers and the techie publications, and I could not understand why she was so desperate to fight with her board and persuade them to buy Compaq. So I was not surprised when that turned out badly and she was fired. I didn't know, however, just how fiery her temperament is. And as I pointed out a few weeks ago, I thought that her foreign policy posture over the top. It's frightening to think that she would be near the nuclear codes. But you might think, well, Bruce has lost his objectivity vis-a-vis Mrs. Fiorina. I disagree. Of course I would think I'm objective. Stay with me. You recognize this guy? You might. But maybe if I showed you an older picture from, say, 30-some years ago. This is David Stockman, who was Ronald Reagan's budget director. He is a staunch conservative. How conservative is he? Well, conservative enough to be among those who believe that recently departed House Speaker John Boehner wasn't conservative enough. So I think his credentials as a conservative are in order. Well, I just discovered that Mr. Stockman has a website, writes a blog. Now, I've heard him several times interviewed when he's written books, but I never went to his website. If you would like to read what he thinks of Mrs. Fiorina, well, he pretty much says what I says, but a lot more harshly. And this is a government wonk. He understands some of these things far beyond any reasons I could have discovered. So if you'd like to read it, his website is, it's all one word, David Stockman's Contra Corner. David Stockman's Contra Corner, all one word. Anyway, he doesn't harshly criticize her, he excoriates her. If you'd like to read it, David Stockman's Contra Corner, do a Google for that with Carly Fiorina, and you'll come together. I didn't like her or trust her, but he has convinced me that I was quite right not to. Hey, let me tell you about my book, Shrink. Or wait, I can let others do it. All right, I said that after the Christmas holiday, the various candidates started shooting again. Yes, of course, Donald Trump never stopped. If you recall, it's been a few months, but I flat out predicted he would not be the nominee. Of course, I've not been alone in that, but it's also true he is defying gravity. Now, I've also said that's because there are those who might prefer a more traditional candidate, a Bob Dole or a John McCain or even a George H.W. Bush. And they have several to choose from, including George H.W. Bush's son, Jeb. Trump likes to say, I've got 40%. I'd suggest it's more like 60% don't like it. But I understand. There are those who think there are simple answers to complex questions. They think deport 11 million illegals is doable. And they believe calling everyone else stupid is behavior to condone. It's an act, folks. And he is full of malarkey. And it is malarkey. Donald Trump says anything, but there's no reason to believe anything that he ever says. To wit, just days ago, Donald Trump was using the salespeople call this the assumptive close. That is, he was speaking as though he were already the nominee and saying about his assumptive opponent, Hillary Clinton, that Bill Clinton's sordid past was fair game. On that point, he's probably right, but then his own past is fair game too. In the summer of 1998, when President Clinton testified to his improper relationship with a White House intern, several days later, Donald Trump, being interviewed by CNBC, said, "Can you imagine how controversial I'd be? You'd think about him with the women. How about me with the women? Can you imagine?" In a 1999 interview, Trump said that Clinton would have gone down in history as a great president, except for the scandal, which he thought was handled badly. In 2008, Trump tore a new one into George W. Bush for getting us into the war, quote, with lies, end of quote. But comparing him to his predecessor, Bill Clinton, said that, well, they tried to impeach him, which was ridiculous. Actually, they did impeach him, but the Senate failed to convict. You would think that a guy running for president would understand some basic tenets of the Constitution. All right, then in 2008, when Hillary was running for president for the very first time, Trump called her a terrific person who would do a good job cutting a nuclear deal with Iran because she always surrounded herself with very good people. These are things Donald Trump said. In 2012, near the end of President Obama's first term, after which Secretary Clinton left, Trump said of her time as Secretary of State, "I think she's a terrific woman. I am biased because I have known her for years. I live in New York. She lives in New York. I really like her and her husband. I like them both a lot. She really works hard, and I think, again, she's been given an agenda. Not all of it is hers, but I think she really works hard, and I think she does a good job. I like her. I just like her." And then he added of the former president, I like her husband. Her husband made a speech on Monday and was very well received. He really is a good guy, and she's a really good person, a good woman. He likes them. That's what he said. Remember, you can write to us at thebrucechannel@yahoo.com, and you can view all of our previous episodes at our Facebook page and at tinyurl.com/brucechannel. Looking back. Okay, as said, I predicted Donald Trump wouldn't be the nominee. I'm not wrong, though. Okay, I must hedge and say I'm not wrong. I may one day be, but I'm not yet. So, some others have tripped on that, too. The Washington Post's Chris Cillizza, whom I usually find to be pretty accurate most of the time, said in February, now this is before the Donald announced his campaign, so let's assume that Trump is serious this time around. Heck, let's assume he actually runs. It doesn't matter. I can't emphasize that strongly enough. In July, Senator Lindsey Graham, who of course just recently ended his own campaign, said, "This is the beginning of the end of Donald Trump." Okay. Now, it's always fun to look back at predictions that didn't fulfill. Some are easy to dismiss because they're made up by people wearing tin hats, like the people who were talking about Jade Helm. Fox was talking all about Jade Helm. You remember? The Army was going to run a practice exercise for a couple months in the summer. It was in the Southwest, especially Texas. Fox had everybody going that the U.S. is going to take over Texas and confiscate everyone's guns. And if you protested, they were going to hold you prisoner in old abandoned Walmart stores. Okay, those predictions didn't come out, but they would have been. All right. Other predictions. I was right in my Super Bowl pick, but, I almost wasn't, I agree. No one is prescient. But here's one of my favorite predictions from last year. The writer was Kevin Drum describing, now this is from over a year ago, why he thought Wisconsin Governor Scott Walker was the front runner for the Republicans. Now, he listed several reasons that sounded good, but here's what caught my eye. Predictions are hard, especially about the future. There is just no arguing with that. It is unassailably, unequivocally true. Predictions are hard, especially about the future. As opposed to, Mitt Romney will become the Republican nominee in the summer of 2012. All right, something new, at least for me. I've mentioned more than once that I am a big fan of Downton Abbey. I've also admitted that finding myself a fan of Downton Abbey is surprising to me, but there you go. Anyway, watching it, one does get a sense of stepping back in time and watching history. I mean, there are historical events. It's a broad sweep of time. There's World War I. There are inventions that we see come into the marketplace, things you and I take for granted, but they were invented, Okay, I'm not going to say any more about it. If you haven't seen it, I strongly urge that you give it a try. Maybe give it a couple of episodes, and the reason for that is this: it is a large ensemble cast, and it takes 2 episodes, maybe 3 to. Oh, that's okay. Now I know who they are. Once you get into it, well, anyway, in the UK, the season began in the fall, and it ends. At least for Downton Abbey, it ends in December. And that's how it's been for all 6 of its seasons. It should come as no surprise, then, that some of the seasons have ended at Christmas time. The storyline is at Christmas. One other little factoid about it. It is produced for the BBC, and while that doesn't surprise, what sort of does is, unlike our television here, the length of each episode is fluid. 53 minutes, 72 minutes, almost 2 hours sometimes. The season enders are usually the longest ones. Anyway, a friend of mine, one who I'm very proud to say, did take my recommendation, tried it, and indeed loved it, and then binged right through until the end. He would ask me from time to time, "Have you seen the Downton Abbey Christmas special?" And I'd say, "Yeah," because I thought I had. I was wrong. I thought the question referred to any one of the season enders that ended at Christmas. Instead, I just learned it refers to a really It's really cool, but I'm not sure what to call it, and I don't want to give it away. But here's the thing. If you are a Downton Abbey fan and you have not seen the Christmas special, Google this combination. Santa, text, Downton Abbey, Vimeo. And then you can stream it. It is on Vimeo. And if you have seen it, you'll know. But if you're like me, you will be very pleasantly surprised. All right, so football. Now we know who's playing for the college championship. Clemson won on New Year's Eve easily. They will face Alabama, which won even more easily. And it may make for a good game. I hope so, because neither of the semis was really a very good game. Okay, on New Year's Day, though, I did enjoy watching my Buckeyes put a whooping on Notre Dame. And this is also the last week for the NFL's regular season. I guess I have to start making some picks. Finally, I'd mentioned that the local paper in Greensboro is running This Day in History in honor of their first 125 years. This one caught my fancy on December 31st. Howard Farrar hasn't seen this brisk business at the Lee Street Army and Navy Surplus Store in Greensboro since Desert Storm. By the way, if you don't recall, you're too young to recall, Desert Storm was the first Gulf War that took place in 91. All right, so check the date. December 31st, 1999. What was going on then? What was driving us all so crazy? What were they selling at the store? Looking for T-shirts displaying Y2K. Wow. So, haven't heard that for a while. Aren't you glad? But for a while, that's all we could hear. Alluding back to predictions, remember how some people told us to stock up on canned goods, fuel, cash, bottled water, because, the world's going to end as soon as we get to the year 2000, Y2K. Some of us were told not to fly because if you're in the air when it turns to midnight, everything goes bluey and you'll never land safely. Anyway, get your firewood and kerosene lamps. I'm not omniscient, but I was not worried. I'd heard the arguments. I read what people said. I came to the conclusion the world was safe, at least from anything Y2K. Well, Y2K, at least I didn't have to look it up as I did last week with YEG. So, first full week of 2016 coming at you. The Winter Jasmine continues to do well, and I hope it is the best week that you've ever had.